بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So I gave you homework last week as well. We'll remember. I was looking for Uncle because Uncle gave us a brilliant summary last week. But inshallah, some of you will give me something else. There's a mic on the sister side, I believe, which maybe we'll get a contribution from the sister side first before the men, inshallah. Sisters, anybody you want to give me your thoughts on Genesis 37? Not you guys yet. On the sister side first. Yeah. Not what I think might be off. Okay. How many of you noticed that there were two dreams? Yeah? Like we're getting into the Bible now. You noticed there were two dreams. Okay, good. So there was the one standard dream, which is what we see in the Quran. And then there's another dream that is not mentioned in the Quran. So we'll come to look at some of this, some of the significance of that, inshallah. Okay, really good. Anything else that you want? Any other sisters want to mention? Okay, brothers. Okay, very interesting. How many of you noticed that he tells his brothers about the dream? What about in the Quran? Does he tell his brothers? He gets told not to, but does he? Presume he doesn't. Okay, good. We presume he doesn't. That is what the Mufassirun generally have said. Although you do find one or two Mufassirun, Imam al-Qurtubi is one example, one of the great exegetes in Andalus, Qurtuba, right? Qurtuba. Very famous Maliki scholar, massive tafsir. He writes that he did narrate, he did tell his brothers about the dream. Now, I can't recall if that was sort of the position he took or whether he was citing somebody else, but I recall reading it in his work that he did narrate, or he did tell the dream to his brothers. So we do find this in the works of tafsir. That's just something to note, right? Although many mufassirun have said that we can infer that Yusuf alayhi salam did not. All right, so that's a very interesting point that Ahmed just mentioned. The Bible very explicitly says, he went and told his dream to the brothers. In fact, what does the Bible say about the dream, about telling his brothers the dream? What's the sequence in contrast to the Quran? First, right? So I'm hoping that already by doing this exercise, right, you're beginning to see already in something that appears to be so familiar, yet you begin to see these very subtle but yet significant differences. And that's already hopefully teaching us about how we need to read the Quran versus compared to the Bible, right? And what the Quran is doing, the Quran is not simply just getting it wrong. The Quran isn't messing up here. The Quran knows exactly what the story is and the sequence and what exactly happened and where the storytelling in the Bible has obviously gone wayward and wrong. Remember that Yusuf alayhi salam comes well before Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. the Bible doesn't even come into formation in the way that, as a written document until well after Musa alayhi salam. Although it was there, it was given to Musa alayhi salam, revelation was given to him, he had the law, he had uh, the revelation, he passed down something for sure. Yeah, they're two different paradigms of how to view the same set of individuals. One paradigm, of course, we have to appreciate it from the perspective of the inheritors of the Bible. And we spoke about this last week, and I think the week before, when we were speaking about Quranic onomastics, right? How to study proper names in the Quran. And we spoke about Yaqub alayhi salam, and we spoke about the other names, and how even within certain names there is this, imperfection that is implied. Yaqub sort of competing with his brother. Right? And you almost sense there is this imperfection um, within some individuals. Now, how did that sort of emerge? How did that come about within the biblical traditions? And that's a whole story in and of itself, the transmission, the preservation, the documentation, and all that sort of issues that revolve around the Bible. Because what is the Bible? It's, our Biblia. It's a whole collection of books that emerge not just at once in one short period of time as it emerged with the Quran. This was over a very long period of time. And then, of course, the canonization of that itself is another story. So within that time, you've got all of these sort of texts emerging, and you've got these pictures that have sort of taken shape. And then later tradition, this is what they're dealing with, and they've got to then navigate, in their commentaries, the rabbinical commentaries, or even the Christians. This is the tradition they've inherited. They've got to work with it, right? And it's unsurprising, therefore, that if this is what is portrayed in the biblical traditions, then we have that is the paradigm we have to sort of somehow navigate. So what is the paradigm? Well, there's some sort of imperfection, but they can be exemplars for us in some sense. And in fact, we're going to look at some of this when we get to certain parts in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, inshallah, and we'll talk about this in the coming weeks, inshallah, in a bit more detail, because which episode are we on now? The episode that's coming has this in a lot more detail. In Potiphar's house, right? When we get to that part, we'll see these conversations come up. But in short, they have to work with that paradigm. We, on the other hand, right, have inherited the Quran, and the Quran, of course, is, as one book actually titles it, the Reformation. Right? The Quran is the reformation of the Jewish and the Christian traditions. Right? The Quranic reformation. And part of that reformation is the paradigm of the prophets. The prophets are not sort of individuals, right, who were prone to making not just any type of mistake, the worst types of mistakes as portrayed in the Bible. We saw this with Nuh alayhi salam. The Quran doesn't accept any of that. The prophets are, far above any, imperfection. And so the Quran is very clear in terms of maintaining that sort of standard. Yeah, it acknowledges they can, have slips. They're human beings. But their slips are not like the slips, that we or as portrayed in the Bible, for sure. They're very different. So the Quran is correcting in that sense. And so I don't know whether it was intentional or not in terms of how the prophets were portrayed in the Bible. Right? Was there like this intentional way almost to sort of denigrate? Allahu A'lam, right? That's difficult to say. At the end of the day, there's authors. That is definitely the case, right? there is this idea of projection. In fact, people talk about this in the story of Jonah, Yunus alayhi salam. Right? I mean, his story is very, very different in the biblical version to the Islamic version. They're very, very different stories to begin with. Part of the Jonah story is almost this in the Bible. It's written from a later standpoint, almost sort of figuring out how on earth did we end up in this position. Like, Jonah, what is he doing? He went to the Assyrians, and right, it's later projection of his image. A number of scholars have written that. Even with Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, right? There is some sort of projection that's happening, within the biblical tradition. Yes, later tradition sort of exculpates him and gives him this exemplary status, but in the generally speaking, he was the problem. And that's how the Israelites became enslaved. How did the Israelites become enslaved? I mean, what's the story? What's the connection between Yusuf alayhi salam and Musa alayhi salam? It goes straight from Yusuf to Musa alayhi salam in the Bible, because that's telling you the story of how the Jews or the Israelites ended up in Egypt under the Pharaonic rule. It's Yusuf alayhi salam who was the reason for them ending up there. They were in Canaan to begin with, Canaan. That's how they ended up being over there. From there, then, that's when all the misery and all that difficulty started over there for them. So you get a number of people sort of saying, Yusuf was the problem in that sense. Later on, they try to sort of, recover his image, and it sort of changes again. But you get these sort of, there's certainly the case that, a number of people are projecting who exactly, how, what are the reasons and stuff. It's very difficult to establish, exactly. But, there are certain indications from time to time, but we don't know who the authors are to begin with. So in some sense, these works, they preserve something of revelation, for sure. I mean, after all, the Quran accepts the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. It accepts that he was a true figure. It accepts that he went from Canaan, the well, the dream, into Egypt. The key features, the skeletal features, as we say, of this story overlap with the Quran. The Quran accepts that. So for sure, these reflect something of revelation and something that's been passed down, or genuine story, which has then become mixed, adulterated, and corrupted. Right? How, when, how, all these details are sort of beyond our knowledge. But these things that happen. Is there an element of projection and all these sort of things in there? Possible. Right? So Yusuf alayhi salam, we're coming to that from the question of him telling his brothers the dream. So he told his brothers the dream. We also see in the sequence that he tells his brothers before he even tells his father. All right, so that's a very interesting observation already. Anything else that you picked up on?
Once he tells his father doesn't accept him.
Okay. How many of you picked that up? You can imagine, right? Yeah. Beta, what's this, right? You think I'm going to bow down to you? And he says it, what does he say? So, I mean, I've got the sentence up here. He said in verse 10, when he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? I was like, child, come on, man. You expecting your parents to bow down to you? Very, very different image in the Quran. Very different. Right? So we're noticing a lot of subtleties already, just in the opening 11 verses. And that's what we're focusing on. Anything else?
One thing that struck me when you talk about bowing down, at the end it talks about bowing to the ground.
Bowing to the ground.
Prostration. Second one from the bottom.
Yeah, okay, and bow down to the ground before you. So bowing down versus sujood. Yeah, there's an overlap between ruku and sujood, even in the Quran. Scholars have noted that, because they're basically part of one of the same act, i.e. salah, it's very possible to use these as interchangeable to denote and signify this act of veneration. So both are highly, acts that signify this great veneration for the individual, and it's in that sense they're both interchangeable. So I would, it's possible, bow down to the ground before you. Now, separately on that point, I mean, that was something that was part of the traditions in the sense that going down on the floor, right? Sujood was actually part of their worship in general, in a broader sense, although this is specific in the sense of to a human being. We'll come to even this specific point, later on, inshallah, to look at the interpretations around the prostration itself. There's interesting views that scholars have put forth around the nature of the prostration or the bowing. Anything else? Yeah. Yep. His brothers were jealous of him. Yeah, and it's interesting here that this jealousy sort of is brought out after the dreams. What is in the Quran? It's the opposite. The jealousy isn't even based on the dream, right? It's based on a perceived favoritism that is not based on any dream. The dream is told to the father, and the father is already warning his son, do not tell your brothers because they will فَيَكِيدُوا لَكَ كَيْدًا. They will intend to harm you. Because the father already knows something is brewing behind the scenes. The fact that they then go on to plot, as we've already discussed, the brothers, Yusuf alayhi salam hasn't told the dream to his brothers. So the fact that they then go on to plot is not because of the dream, it's because something was already there from before. Here it seems now the brothers were jealous of him because of the dream, not because of any other reason. Right? Okay, there's a lot of things that we're already picking up just in these 11 lines. Anything else? Yeah. So the qamis. What did you notice about the qamis? It's more prevalent. I mean, there's a mention of a robe, the robe of ornaments, as they call it, right? That was given especially to this young child, which could also be one of the causes of this sort of perceived favoritism. He's given this special robe that nobody else is given. But yeah, there's no mention of this particular robe in the Quran. Although, as we looked at before, one of the previous tasks was to go and identify the key words that recur through the surah. And one of the words that a number of you identified was the word qamis. So the word qamis itself did recur throughout the surah a good couple of times, yes, and it does play this very prominent role within the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. It plays an even more prominent role in the story in the Bible, but still has some prominent role in the Quran too. But this particular mention of the robe of ornaments that was given to Yusuf alayhi salam is not mentioned in the Quran. Okay. Any other points that you mentioned? There's one more point that I want to sort of bring it to your attention. Just in these opening 11. I'm gonna put the glasses on there. So I don't know. Go, give me one more. Let's see if you can pick up this one more. I'll give you 1 minute. Can't come to the class and just say, you've got to come and do work. Let's give you a clue. It's near to the opening. It's in the opening lines. No, it's not that one. Anybody? Go on. Take a guess. You can take guesses. I'm not gonna. Jacob's family life. Interesting, but no, that's not what I was thinking about. All right, go on. One more try. You gonna say something? No. Let's ask Uncle Umar. That's the one. The quiet one speaks. He comes with the, mashallah. 17 years old. I mean, that's a very interesting point. And on the basis of that, you're going to see very significant differences. What does the Quranic account imply? He's very young, right? The father sort of being almost cautious and like, I don't want to send him with you, right, at this stage. Like, he's unable to protect himself. The way the brothers will describe themselves in the verses to come, right? And then when he's found in the well, all of these things sort of indicate that at this particular point in time, Yusuf alayhi salam is still a very young boy. 17 years old is very different, right? Yeah, I mean, he can have a good wrestling match with the brothers as well or something, you know? But they're very different. And in fact, we'll see, as we go, inshallah, maybe the next set of verses will be something you can compare to what we look at today, inshallah ta'ala. So, yeah, we're looking at 1 to 11 today. 17 is basically the age that is given to Yusuf alayhi salam over here. Then there's also this question of two dreams. So when you look at the next passage, inshallah, for next week, and we sort of compare it to what we're looking at today, again, you'll be able to see now, based on this age of his, some of the tasks that he's given to do by his father. So let's move further into and look sort of a bit deeper into the way the dreams have been received, not by Muslim scholarship, but to understand how the Christian tradition, how they sort of engage with this. So if you look here, Joseph's robe, which is what Ahmed noted. If you look at Syriac Christian typology, so typology we spoke about typology at the very beginning, right? And we spoke about typology in the lens that the Quran is almost sort of foreshadowing the way things are going to play out, right? In some sense. The story of Yusuf alayhi salam is already indicative of the fact that the Muslims are going to be victorious, right? They might be driven out of the land and then they will emerge, right, as ultimately people who will come back and rule. There are hints of that. It's foreshadowed, this typology, in Surah Yusuf as there is in many other places, and this is at a time in Mecca. Now, the way that the Christians are also reading these stories, and this is something that is common throughout their tradition, is that they will read through the Old Testament and all the stories in there as almost like this foreshadowing of the coming of Jesus. So it's a typology. Now, Syriac Christian typology is just indicative of something that was more contemporary almost to the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? It wasn't too far from the time of the Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam. So what scholars are looking at when they're looking at, well, what is happening in the Christian world, and one of the things that scholars have noted is, time and again, is how the Quran is oftentimes playing, right, is aware of debates and conversations that are happening within this Christian space in their languages, in Syriac, right, which is an extension of Aramaic. What is happening over there? Yet the Prophet ﷺ doesn't have that language, but still is somehow not simply just aware of, but even is sort of wading into some of these debates and removing things because of certain, right? Because of it could be false themselves, or because of certain implications, or whatever else. And so here, this question of this robe, was there this robe to begin with? So this is how some of the Christians read this, right? This robe that comes in the story. They read this in two ways. One way is that it sort of signifies the incarnation. And another Syriac scholar, he sort of reads this as the crucifixion. So if you look at Afrahat in his demonstration, he says that the robe typifies the incarnation of the Son of God. This is the beginning of Christ's salvific life. What on earth does this even mean? So he describes it as the persecuted Joseph was the image of the persecuted Jesus. And you've just got to really, why am I showing this to you? Not because I just want you to sort of be like, wow, what is all this, right? That is not the intention. It's to show you like how far-fetched these readings are, right? In order for them to sort of say Jesus was foreshadowed and how they're trying to read Jesus into everything, it's like, that just does not make sense at all. Like, really? How do you make a connection between that and that? They're just so far apart, right? In any case, so he says the persecuted Joseph was the image of the persecuted Jesus. The father of Joseph clothed him in a long-sleeved tunic, and the father of Jesus clothed him in a body from the Virgin. You find the parallel for me, right? Hamza's like still scratching his head. Saying, what are you reading? Right. This is the point. What is it? Right? It's very, very, very different to the type of typology that we're doing. Very different. And that's what I want us to appreciate. Right? So this robe has no significance in our tradition. Right? For the Christians, this was like very significant. This is like the robe of incarnation. On another way, and this is a very interesting one. The crucifixion. I mean, what is the crucifixion? What is the crucifixion? Right? It's he came. This is the end of Christ's salvific life. He came, and he was crucified in the end, in order to atone for everybody else. So this is what is written in another work in the Syriac tradition. The truth compelled Jacob to depict the crucifixion in Joseph. So he made a long sleeve robe and clothed him in it. In his love, he made a long armed garment for his son, in order to portray the great cross of the Son of God. In a great mystery, and that's exactly what it is. Right? In a great mystery. Thank you, you just spelled it out for us. He stretched out the long sleeves on the young one, and that was as if he extended him on a cross while clothing him. You follow that? That's what it's. It's the cross. It's like, okay. Right? This is the way they're trying to read into the narratives for the coming of Jesus in these stories. And for us, it's like the robe has no significance at all. Reverse engineering. We come later and trying to find all these clues and hints of the coming of Jesus. Now let's look at the second one. This is quite an interesting one. So the other dream that was mentioned, I mean, the Quran makes no mention of that first robe. The other dream, the first dream, the Quran makes no mention of this as well. Why does the Quran make no mention of the robe? Why does the Quran make no mention of this first dream? Arguably because it wasn't even there, right? Or because there's simply no significance attached to it. I mean, arguably with this dream, one could say that this dream was not even there to begin with, right? So let's have a look at this dream that comes in the Bible and how they sort of, the typology that sort of is connected to this. Again, the same guy, Jacob, he interprets Joseph's sheaf, right? So what is the sheaf? It's all the wheat that's put together, and it's a type of the Eucharist. You want to know what the Eucharist is, right? No, the eating of the wine and bread, right? That they do at the when they have their ceremonies and celebrations at Mass. The body of the Son of God, which is said to give life to the world. That's what the Eucharist is. So obviously, it's this partaking in this meal, which is almost like partaking in Jesus, his body. So what is this? Revelation depicted the body of our Lord by means of Joseph's sheaf. So this dream wasn't even about Joseph; it was about the coming of Jesus. So what happened was, of which all longing nations were satisfied. I am the bread, and whoever eats of me will not hunger again. Right? How does the bread come out? It's obviously the wheat. For in me is fullness and life for the one who is worthy of me. This bread came down from above for the hungry nations, and there is no fullness in any bread other than in him. Joseph's sheaf rose up in order to show where the life-giving bread is. Because in the end, it was his sheaf that sort of really overcame all the other sheaves that were around, right? Which is to indicate, this is the sheaf of Jesus, not even Joseph. And then you've got to not only just sort of see the sheaf coming up, you've got to eat part of that as well, because the bread comes out of that, and that's you partaking in Jesus. Right? It's very interesting. So then you've got, there's other things as well, right? We won't go into this. Let's just leave that. I mean, there's parallels between Christianity and obviously pagan beliefs, right? That's been very clearly established, especially in the case of Paul. Right? Where is Paul getting all of his ideas from? At the time of the millennium, and what were the pagan ideas that were in circulation? Where is he getting this idea of the Son of God? That was something that was already common at the time, right? Exactly. So it's something that was already there, and there's a lot of scholarship around. We won't go into this, but Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. What was the role of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam when he came? The Quran, of course, is very, very, very clear. He was a prophet sent to the Israelites. He wasn't sent to the Gentile nations, right? Which is obviously what Christianity became. And it became that through Paul, because right, Paul is the one that's really he is the face of Christianity even more than Jesus is. But there's a lot of scholarship that's been done on the idea of Jesus the Jew, right? Isa alayhi salatu wasalam was a Jewish individual, right? He was sent to the Jewish people. He was sent as the Messiah to them. And he was sent there to reform, right, the things that had, the aberrations that had already kicked in to their religion. And that's why, the rabbis at the time and stuff, they all rejected him. So Isa alayhi salatu wasalam was sent to the Jewish people, and there's obviously many indications of that within the Bible itself. It just so happened that James and all of those that were then the inheritors of Jesus' tradition, which were obviously part of the Jewish tradition, they were then overpowered by Paul, and in the long run, that's what happened. The Pauline tradition became the dominant Christian tradition, and it is what it is afterwards. But there's a lot of scholarship looking at the historical Jesus and saying, well, who was Jesus? And this isn't sort of Muslim scholars, but this is sort of non-Muslim scholars looking at this. I mean, there's there's a lot of work that's being done now on Jesus the Jew. How did we get to that? Pagan, right? So yeah, where did all these ideas come from? There's a lot of scholarship being done on that. It's quite interesting. And as Muslims living in this country, this is something we should be aware of. Why? Because it informs our conversations with a lot of people, even though there's Tommy Robinson and all these sort of things happening, right? Right, Unite the Kingdom and whatever else is happening. We're a Christian nation, so okay, we'll talk. Right? This is what our knowledge tells us about Christianity, and we have a role to play. So we should, try to equip ourselves with some of this knowledge, and inshallah, hopefully, part of this exposing is just to sort of make us aware of certain things, so that we can have informed discussions with, people that we meet at work or at college, university, or wherever else we may be. So khairan, let's go straight into the next sort of verses. Any questions at this point? Any questions? No? Okay, let's come back to the Quran now. And to the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam. So this is episode 1 still, which is after the dream. This is scene 2. This is how Sayyid Qutb portrays it. Right? Not me making this up. This is Sayyid Qutb. This is scene 2, verses 8 to 10. What is scene 2? The dream has happened. Father's been told the dream. Now we're being told about the brothers. What are the brothers up to? How they're talking to one another. إِذْ قَالُوا. Right? So the story now begins proper over here. They said, يُوسُف وَأَخُوهُ أَحَبُّ إِلَىٰ أَبِينَا مِنَّا وَنَحْنُ عُصْبَةٌ إِنَّ أَبَانَا لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. So notice there's a lam at the beginning of Yusuf. La Yusuf. Right? Can you see that? And can you see that at the end of the verse, inna abana. So the word inna is an emphatic particle in the Arabic language. The la that comes at the beginning of the word name Yusuf is also used for emphasis. So both of these are already, we're seeing here that there is emphasis in their statements. There is emphasis in their statement. Why is emphasis even being used? Why would emphasis be used? Right, there's frustration, there's this is really, really getting to this point, right? This is absolutely the case. And right, this is without doubt a matter of fact. Right? That's what it's trying to highlight. إِذْ قَالُوا, they all said. Now, did they all say it? Clearly not. Right? But these are the Quran, what it's doing is it's capturing the sentiments that were being expressed, right, amongst themselves. So what is the sentiment that's being expressed by the brothers to one another? They said, Yusuf and his brother. Now the brother is not named here. It doesn't say Binyamin, right? Because his name is Binyamin. But the Quran doesn't mention his name over here. Why does it not mention his name? What could the reason be for not mentioning his name? Sorry, it's not? Okay, it's not significant, but what else could it be adding to that? It's just a baby. Yeah. Exactly, right? You see who is, the prime they have hatred for, or the jealousy is particularly towards Yusuf alayhi salam. And perhaps the father's love for his brother is on account of his love for Yusuf alayhi salam as well. So there's a number of opinions that the scholars have put forth over here, but one thing for sure that they've noted is that Yusuf alayhi salam seems to be the main problem in their eyes. His brother is an extension of that fact, which is why ultimately then in the plotting, who is the one that they plot against? Yusuf alayhi salam. His brother's not even involved, right? They get rid of ultimately Yusuf alayhi salam. It seems to be that the attention is by and large upon Yusuf alayhi salam. So anyway, what is it that they say? They say Yusuf and his brother, right? His brother, they are more beloved to our father than us. وَنَحْنُ عُصْبَةٌ, right? Or Usba is essentially a group of people that are sort of aiding and supporting one another. You have this idea of an asr, something that ties something together, right? So when you tie something together, each thing is making this stronger. The more you pull it, the more stronger it gets. So this group of people, they're like a group of people, they say between 10 and 40. That's what an Usba refers to, a band, a group. And it's through each person being in this collective, that they're able to defend one another. And they're able to, as a collective, get various errands and tasks and activities done. What is the point that they're making over here? Yusuf, his brother, what worth do they have? What value do they carry? We are the usba, they are not. We are the ones that do everything that our father needs. We are the ones in service to him. We are the ones that are bringing benefit to him. We are the ones that carry out all the duties and the tasks. He's an old man at this point, right? We know that he's reached an old age. And so at this point, they are carrying out all these tasks. They are the ones benefiting the father. These two, on the other hand, what are they doing? They're doing none of that. So why is our father's love directed towards them more than it is to us? So you begin to already see what their basis of value is. It's the physical, the material. Whereas the father, no, love is number one, something that you can't choose. Right? And the scholars have always been very, very, very clear about that. So this whole idea about favoritism, right? We're talking here about the distribution of love. The distribution of love, the Quran is very explicit. It's out of your control. It's out of your control. You can't choose to love one person more than another and switch your views the next day or something. It just doesn't happen in that way. But what the Quran mandates, though, is equality, fair distribution between people. Yaqub alayhi salam for sure is not doing something, right? He's not being unjust towards the brothers. It's not like he's not giving attention. We can sort of assume this to be the case. The Quran is explicit, but as a prophet, there's no reason to assume otherwise. The brothers perceiving one thing does not necessarily mean that he's being unjust towards them, because they're two separate things here, right? There's a perception here that is being expressed. This perception of theirs is now got to a point where they haven't sort of sought clarification from their father. This is now it's getting to a point where they're doing this amongst themselves. And this is, again, it's very interesting to see this happening even in a prophetic household. Right? These things can happen. There's no guarantee of whose household one is in that. Right? It should tell us, right, the challenges that are always at play. Right? And the father diagnosed the ultimate, the core of the issue, shaitan. Shaitan is always out there to cause misery and problems. If he can get into a prophet's family, he will make sure he'll do it. And this is what's happening over here. We're seeing now the way shaitan is working through these brothers. They are valuing the material. They want attention for sure. It's not, again, necessary that the father wasn't giving attention to the sons. He probably was. But the attention you give to somebody that's older is going to be very different to the attention that you give to somebody that's younger. That's just natural, right? You play with a child in a very different way to the way that you play with an older child, right? Dr. Ahmed will know this better than anybody else. Right? So Anyway, they value this being an usbah. The scholars have said, well, maybe there is, some truth to the fact that they are perceiving something, that there is, some attention maybe that Yusuf alayhi salam is getting that perhaps the brothers are not getting. What could be the basis of that, right? It's not to say that they're not getting their right, it's just that he's getting a bit more attention. And that happens, with, for example, somebody might have a whole group of students. They see one is, very adept, one is very capable, and that student naturally, is showing the potential of, doing something great, and so that person's given a bit more attention. Why? Because somebody, the teacher in this case, knows what this student is potentially capable of, and therefore they're naturally giving more to them. The dream has already happened. What is the time frame between the dream and what's happening over here? Wallahu a'lam. We don't know. Maybe there was already something before Yusuf alayhi salam already displayed, good character. He's a young child, and there's a whole range of reasons that the father is showing this attachment to this young child. He's old, these kids are young. On top of that, now the dream's taking place, and now the father already knows that this child's going to be something special. Maybe that's already increasing now, right? There's an attention that's being given here. He's going to be the one that's going to carry the legacy of the family of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam forward. So maybe the father's giving him that knowledge, right? Maybe he's giving him that attention. And that's what some of the scholars have noted here, that right, this attention, it's on the basis of the virtue that Yaqub alayhi salam has recognized in his son. And it should have been in the case of, so it's not material, it's spiritual. The sons are seeing as material, right? On their part, it's a spiritual thing. The sons should have perhaps, come and spoken about this. They should have asked their father for clarification, right? And sought to aspire towards becoming something like that, right? See the value in him as opposed to, but Allah had planned what Allah had planned. And so this was meant to happen. Now, the case is over here that, they plot and plan, and this is the sentiment that they're feeling, that Yusuf alayhi salam is more beloved, and his brother, of course, to Yaqub alayhi salam than us. And this is a problem because we are the ones benefiting our father, they're not. And then they make this very interesting statement. Inna abana lafi dalalin mubin. Now, what do you notice over here? What word is being used over here that you see used throughout the Quran, but used in a very different sense over here? We sort of touched upon this in one of the lessons earlier on. Can you see any word here that stands out in this last part of the verse? Inna abana lafi dalalin mubin. There's only a couple of words. Go on, Ahmed. Dalal. What does the word dalal in the Quran indicate? Misguidance. So there's a lot of words in the Quran that obviously have this religious significance. One of the peculiarities of the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam is how a lot of those words are used in their more linguistic sense. Right? Here they don't mean the father as a prophet is wayward. Right? They don't mean that at all. But here you begin to see their relationship with their father, despite the fact that their father is this prophet who's been honored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who comes from a prophet, right? Who himself is the son of a prophet. He is carrying this legacy forward. They don't see the value in their father, nor do they value what it is that their father is doing, right? This jealousy has led them to almost overlook all of that and to see their father as being wrong in exactly what he's doing. Balal here means that basically he's unjust. That's what they mean here. This prophet, who is our father, this human being, right, who is our father, he is being unjust in this situation. He's being unfair, and that is totally, totally, totally wrong. Right? So then it goes on to continue, and we'll read this and we'll stop here, inshallah. اقتلوا يوسف أو اطرحوه أرضا يخل لكم وجه أبيكم وتكونوا من بعده قوما صالحين. Very interesting here. The way this sentence is phrased is, it's what we call in Arabic, right? There is a command and then there is the response to the command, right? It's what they call in Arabic grammar, and I know that Muhammad is doing some grammar, and I know that one or two others are doing it, so for the benefit of them, there's something called Jawab al-Amr. Cover that? Right? Al-Amr and Jawab al-Amr. So you have a command, uqtulu, kill Yusuf, or cast him into a land. If you do that, يَخْلُ لَكُمْ وَجْهُ أَبِيكُمْ. This is what's going to happen. Right? So it's not expressing this in a conditional sentence. If you do this, this will happen. Say, do this because that's going to be the outcome. Right? So what is it that is going to be the outcome of this? It's we want Father's attention for us. يَخْلُ لَكُمْ. Right? This means that there's a space here. The father is basically his wajh, his face. It's a very powerful image here. The face is literally directed towards this particular space, right? That space now, once you get rid of him, you toss him away somewhere or you kill him, that space is going to become empty. Once that space becomes empty, now it's going to be a space for you to enter. And then his face will just be directed to you, which is completely the opposite of what happened in the end, right? His love only became even greater. It's going to be now directed to you and to you alone. The space is going to be just for you, right? And so once you've done that, وَتَكُونُوا مِن بَعْدِهِ قَوْمًا صَالِحِينَ. Interesting how human beings think, right? Right? Let's just do the evil deed. And then we can become good people after that. Let's just do it once. Let's just do it. Right? So after that, you will become good people. After that. So here, there's a number of things for us to sort of expand upon. One is, just looking at how they want to get rid of him. First one is just kill him. Or throw him, tarah, ready to toss something and to throw it far off, into ardan. So the scholars here say that there's a tanween here. In Arabic, you use an alif lam, right, to indicate something that is known, usually. Whereas the indefinite, which is indicated by the tanween here, the an, ardan, indicates something that is often ambiguous or unknown. So what is the ambiguity that is here? It's to basically throw him into a place that is completely unknown. That's the idea here. How are we going to get rid of him? We're going to get rid of him by either killing him once and for all, or the way to get rid of him is to get rid of him by casting him and throwing him into a place that is still unknown to us now. It's not even in the vicinity that we're aware of here. Let's go far, and let's just literally get rid of him so that he'll never make his way back. That's the whole idea here. Once you do that, يَخْلُ لَكُمْ وَجْهُ أَبِيكُمْ. Your father's gaze, your father's attention will be freed and it will be directed only to you. Once you've done that, right, وَتَكُونُوا, and you will become. After that, either after Yusuf, after doing this deed, a qawman salihin, a people that will then mend their affairs, will change they mend their ways, and they will become righteous. So how are they planning to do that? Well, they might repent. That's one of the ideas. So one of the ideas here could be that salihin is used in a religious sense, that they're using it in the sense that we're going to repent, we're going to become better people. Or it could be used in a secular sense, as we've already seen with the word balal. What is salih in the sense of a secular sense here? Our life will be better. We're going to have a better life now without him. So we'll be people whose life will be better without him. Right? Both meanings are possible here. There's no conflict between either of the two. So let's stop over here, inshallah ta'ala, and then we'll pick up, inshallah, with قَالَ قَائِلٌ مِّنْهُمْ, with the final verse in this scene, which is where one person said, don't do that. So we'll look at this, inshallah, in a bit more detail, and we'll talk about some other themes that emerge out of this, inshallah, before moving to the next scene. Bi-idhnihi ta'ala. Jazakallah khairan. Any questions? Anybody have any questions, any comments, any thoughts?
Part of the resentment also due to that Yusuf eventually were basically born from one mother and the brothers were also born from the rest.
It could be part of the reason.